Hi, Ed. It's great to
Hi.
have you today. The last time we met, I just learned so much from you, and I thought this would be a great way to, again, reconnect the day that we're kickstarting Sleep Apnea um, Education Week. And I thought, let's have that conversation. There's something you mentioned last time that I found very fascinating. There was a significance to the date April 18th. And I
Yes.
want you to kind of share that with our audience today, why that date was so important to you.
Well, um, April 18th, 1981, in the British medical journal Lancet, there was the first publication of by Colin Sullivan, an Australian respirologist. So he was a pulmonary physician who had developed, after a lot of work, and published a study of treatment for sleep disordered breathing on 5 patients. And this was the first time anybody previous to that, any significant treatment of sleep disordered breathing was required a tracheostomy.
Mm.
That was it. There was a surgical intervention, period. Colin Sullivan really kind of just changed the whole course of treatment by making it possible for there to be, for using a device to help keep the upper airway open during sleep, especially if during sleep and periods of sleep disordered breathing. I do want to make one note, though.
Sure.
And that is that the Lancet is the paramount premier medical journal, but it's British. Here in the United States, the first publication in the New England Journal of Medicine was having to do with sleep disordered breathing was October 7th, 1982. And the lead author on that was somebody who was a member of our board of directors for many years, and also one of my teachers, David Rappaport. And so we had it, the British had it first, but the UK had it first. We got it a little bit, about a year later, a little more than a year later. So I think it's important to recognize. I felt, as the executive, at the time, as the executive director of the American Sleep Apnea Association, was to recognize that date. Now, I wasn't all about making it a federal holiday or anything like that, but it was one specific date where everybody could just kind of focus their attention. And if you were somebody who was on the fence about getting diagnosed or having challenges with treatment, this would be one day where you should be able to find somebody to talk to on either side. So for me, it was important. And I have a little story.
Sure.
At one of this would have been at a conference where Colin Sullivan was speaking. For some reason, I don't know why I didn't go to this, but a fellow that Bob Stanton,
Yes,
truck driver with sleep apnea and a vocal supporter and proponent of treatment for truckers with sleep apnea. He actually borrowed my badge, my conference badge, so that he could go in and hear Colin speak. And what Colin afterwards, he went up and shook Colin's hand, and Colin gave him this necktie. and which is, if you can tell,
yes.
this is a PSG 16 channels, and I think there's an apnea in there somewhere. But he came out, gave me back my badge, and then he said, "Listen, I can't wear a necktie. You might find this useful." And he handed it to me. I didn't grab it, but I did pull it in very, very closely, and I wasn't going to let anybody take it from me because it was a prized possession. So I thought today would be appropriate to wear this necktie to talk about the American Sleep Apnea Association, sleep disordered breathing, and kind of the field of sleep medicine as it is.
That's amazing story. And thank you. Thank you for wearing that tie today. So again, as the executive director, what do you see as some of your achievements, again, during your tenure? This is from 2000, I believe, 2000
Four.
up to 2014. Yeah, 2004 to 2014. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I didn't realize this when I was hired for the job, but the woman who had been the executive director had already left.
Mm.
And there was nobody leading the organization. There was actually a woman who was kind of her assistant, who was kind of keeping things going. So I came in and basically kind of had to figure it out on my own. And one of the things that I realized very immediately was there was this what was called, or what is still called, the Awake Network. And Awake stands for alert, alert well, and keeping energetic. And basically, it's a group of it was created by a group of sleep lab technicians as a support group for patients, mainly for their patients, but it was also a way to bring prospective patients in to hear, or people who are having difficulty with treatment. And there was about 20 or 30 of these groups around the country, but it was all very kind of a loose affiliation. What they did was they turned it over to the ASAA, and we, as part of our electronic transmissions, as far as our website, we would have the directory and key contacts for the Awake Network, which I thought was really, really, really very important.
So almost like before, this whole virtual thing that we have now, this was almost like a support network, support group across.
I mean, this was
Yeah.
these were in person
Yeah.
support groups where people would stand up and tell their story and complain or do whatever it was that they were going to do. I actually had the opportunity to speak at a couple of them during my time there. Probably the other thing that was really important, and this were programs that were created elsewhere, but turned over to ASAA because we had kind of the bandwidth to be able to manage them and to promote them and to make them go. And that was the CPAP assistance program. And, back before the Affordable Care Act came into existence, people would have either the insurance companies would not cover the DME, they would not cover the medical equipment, or they wouldn't cover the replacements, the refills for the equipment. And so people were struggling. I don't want to tell you the stories of people who had machines that they had not cleaned in 10 years. There's probably this much dust, and I can't imagine what they were breathing.
Right.
But for people who could not get a CPAP machine, we had a contact in Minnesota who was a DME who actually would receive gently used CPAP machines in exchange for new ones. And he wanted to do something with that. And so he started the program, but it was interfering with his business of selling CPAP machines. So he said, Ed, why don't you market the program and take care of the paperwork and making sure that all the proper documentation is in place, and then just send us the order and we'll send it out. And we did that. And in fact, it's probably, and I would imagine that up until the Affordable Care Act came into being, it was really a godsend to a lot of people. In fact, the ASAA still is engaged in that program. So, and they're doing Awake and they're doing CPAP assistance. So those are really two things that were really important. Probably the third thing, visibility, we were there. We were actually, I was, when things were really moving, we were at our high point. I was attending 3 medical conferences a year: CHEST, the sleep meeting, and then, and I don't know why I'm blanking on it, but there was a third one. that we would go to, and people would come up to us. They'd look at our material. We were talking to people from foreign countries who were attending the meetings. So the American Sleep Apnea Association, one of the things that was really important to me was visibility. And this was visibility at this point within the medical profession. In fact, there was one time I went to a conference of anesthesiologists and actually presented an award to an anesthesiologist who had come up with the criteria, the criteria that's still in use now for anesthesiologists, the set of questions that they ask somebody to determine whether they're actually a candidate for general anesthetic or not, because they might impact sleep disordered breathing. So I got around to a few medical conferences, which was a lot of fun. And I think I don't know whether I changed minds or not. Anyway, I was there. I think the fourth contribution, significant contribution that I made to, as executive director of the American Sleep Apnea Association, was updating the sleep apnea video. The video that had been was a cassette tape. It was made. It was a cassette tape, but it was made in this. I think it looked like it was made in the late '60s, early '70s. Or early '80s. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And I managed to secure funding and got it produced with the help of my spouse to distribute. And we were, and actually Sleep Labs were contacting us saying, do you have anything on DVD? Because our VHS player is broke, and now we can because they were using our video, even though it was ancient, they were still using it as an orientation video for somebody coming to the sleep lab for in-lab polysomnography. So, and it, now that everything is online, it's actually you can actually and of course everybody's got their own sleep apnea video. But one thing that I can tell you is that this sleep apnea video was non-branded. So there's no, there's no, no decals from various companies, or you couldn't tell what mask somebody was using. Or I thought that was important, again, because we are a nonprofit and wanting to be, wanting to be Catholic and include everybody. So that's how it's actually, you can find it if you're interested. You can find it on, and I think maybe I sent you the link. You can find it on Vimeo.
Okay.
And the thing is that we couldn't get it on YouTube because it was too long.
Right.
It was 10 minutes as opposed to 8 minutes. It had been 8 minutes, then it would have gotten onto YouTube, but it's on Vimeo.
All right, we'll add the link. We'll add the link, below this video for people who are interested in watching that. Tell us a bit about the conference that you hosted, which I've heard some great things about, and also your engagement with federal agencies.
At one point, we had not gotten into the conference game, and it was I think kind of past time for us to do it. There was a fellow who had previously worked for the National Sleep Foundation, who was now consulting. He and I I had not met him previously, but we met. He said, "Listen, it's time to do a conference." And I said, "Okay, we're going to do a conference on sleep apnea and transportation." And it was, it brought together, we had exhibitors, we had speakers, we had a box lunch. It was.
That's amazing. That's
it was, and the attendance was, there were all kinds of people showing up for it in order to see it. We did two of them. And I don't know whether it was the first one or the second one. It may have been the second one, where we actually had representatives from the transportation agencies speak and talk about where they were what their thinking was
Mhm.
about how to address sleep disordered breathing in the with the people that they're regulating, the employees of the companies that they're regulating. So it was very heartening. And again, I'm surprised that people are still talking about it, but it was again one of the high points of my work as executive director of the American Sleep Apnea Association, but also a contribution. It was a contribution that I made to the field of sleep medicine in general, because everybody and their brothers showed up.
Yeah.
The other, you mentioned federal agencies. I, whenever being in Washington, D.C., and being kind of a geek about politics and policy in Washington, D.C., I knew when things were happening.
Mhm.
And usually they were happening at some place that was nearby, and I would just go.
Mhm.
And if I could get on to speak, either it was a policy conference or a medical conference, I would get on just to wave the flag of diagnosis and treatment of sleep disorder breathing. Um, Probably one of the highlights, and this was the first time I actually spoke before an agency. I spoke before MCAT,
Okay.
which was the group within Medicare
Mhm.
that makes decisions about what's covered, what's not covered, and all of that. And this was, and I generated some ire with the AS, AASM, because I this was right at the point where in-lab polysomnography was where in-home sleep studies was beginning to encroach
Mhm.
on in-lab polysomnography. And most of the owners of sleep labs were members of the AASM,
Right.
the American Association of Sleep Medicine, American Academy of Sleep Medicine. And I went before MCAT and said, look, there are too many people.
Yeah.
There's too much disease. You really have to find a way to make alternatives to in-lab polysomnography a
Mhm.
possibility in order to be able to get people treated. And in fact, one of the 3 articles that I co-wrote with members of the ASAA board that are in the National Library of Medicine was an open letter to the sleep medicine community saying it's time.
Mhm.
We have to find a way to expand the possibility of diagnosis of sleep disordered breathing. You know, I mean, sleep labs are there; they're important.
Mhm.
They're always going to be important, but there's just too many people
Right.
to try and get everybody to line up. To go into a sleep lab where they have 6-week, 8-week waiting period in order to get in. Somebody might die,
Mhm.
got a chance to get for in-lab polysomnography. So that one, those were, anytime that I had the opportunity, again, as the executive director, as a patient organization, not as, a trade organization or whatever, I would use that opportunity to speak to the people
Mhm.
at the policy level. In fact, I did a couple of Hill meetings, and had chats with people had chats with people's legislative assistants about sleep apnea, and they all nodded, and they gave me a pen and said thank you, goodbye. But again, it was a question of visibility,
Yes.
and to me, that was what was critical.
Mhm.
I think so. Promoting alternatives to in-lab polysomnography was one thing
Yeah.
that the ASAA was behind. The second thing that they were behind is uh, it's something that the Board of Registered Polysomnographic Technologists promotes and provides the designation for is Certification in Clinical Sleep Medicine,
Okay.
the CCSM. And whenever I had opportunities to speak to sleep technologists, and I spoke a number of times at the American Academy of Sleep Technologists meeting, I said, this is the future. This is where you need to be headed in this direction. If you're not headed in this direction, you're going to become a dodo and become extinct, because the sleep labs are all kind of they're reducing in number to just a few that have good connections, or have streams of people coming in and are addressing something more than just garden variety sleep disorder breathing. So I was instrumental in making that happen. I brought together the woman who was the president of the BRPT with the chair of the sleep committee of the American College of Chest Physicians, and I said, the two of you need to talk. And in fact, we had a premiere party for the new sleep apnea video, and we had it at a hotel, and we had canapes and drinks, and it was great fun. And the next day was a meeting that I attended where it was hosted by the chest physicians, and the people from the BRPT were there. And they were listening to a presentation from a diabetes educator, which is sort of the original kind of helper to people who have type 2 diabetes, or maybe even type 1 diabetes. And so they wanted to get some information from her about how it works and what was involved. And so that was the beginning. And it took maybe three or 4 years for it to really come into its own as a designation. And in fact, before our conversation today, I just went to Google and put in CCSM or CCSH, and the number of hits links to websites that are either providing practice education, practice exams, educational, in order to be able to get this designation. And in fact, I have a lot of in social media, I have a lot of friends who are sleep technologists, many of whom, most of whom, have the CCSM designation after their name. And so, in terms of a contribution, and am I making a contribution to the sleep field? I'm making a contribution to the foot soldiers in the diagnosis of sleep disorder breathing, the sleep technologists. They are the doctor may read, they're reading the studies, signing off on the studies. The sleep technologists were the ones that were sitting up all night watching somebody get out of bed and go wandering around, or light a cigarette in their room. And I mean, they had a really tough job. And this was as much as anything was for them to be able to find another path.
Right.
And I think that sort of leads into sort of where things are going.
Yeah, first of all, I do want to say, I think that's just amazing hearing you say that. And I think, it's so important to give credit to those people, sleep technologists who are there working directly with patients. Mention a couple policy, you and I've talked briefly about some policy changes that we've actually seen happen, since you were an executive director. And would you want to say something about that? Have you seen, yeah.
I don't, unfortunately, I'm not getting, I don't have the streams of information that I have. Yeah. But one thing leads me to believe that talking about and greater awareness of sleep disorder breathing as an impairment to the operation of dangerous equipment was the accident that happened in Palatine, Ohio. I think it's Ohio. There was only one engineer on that train, and through the efforts of the through the efforts of the Department of Transportation. They said that you can't have that. And while they didn't say that it had to do with sleep disorder, it was because of sleep disorder, it was safety. And part of the safety that's involved is that you may have one of the operators, one of the engineers who may be treated, may not be treated, may have significant sleep deprivation, which could impair his ability to operate, a 3 mile long train safely. So, did Secretary Buttigieg do it because of me or because of the American Sleep Apnea Association? Who knows? What's important is that now, instead of there being just one person on the train, there is at least two to be able to, so that there's somebody as a backup in case there's a problem. Somebody has a problem.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. And you did mention something about American College of Cardiology.
Oh, well, I think the American College of Cardiology for a very long time, I think, downplayed the significance of sleep disordered breathing. I had the opportunity to see, I don't know whether I still have it, actually may have copied that last paragraph, but the first significant review article that they wrote that was published in their journal was a review of diagnosis and treatment of sleep disorder breathing. The thing that kind of indicated to me that they really didn't get it was the last paragraph that said, this field really doesn't, it's too difficult to diagnose and it's too difficult to treat. There's nothing that we can do. And in fact, I think that enough has been said about it, particularly the cardiovascular consequences of untreated sleep disorder breathing, that all of a sudden they woke up. And then they also realized that, with all apologies to physicians in other fields related to sleep medicine, when the cardiologists step in, everybody moves aside. And so, they now own the space. I don't know whether they really own it, but they've got a significant
impact. Recognized, yeah.
Yeah, they recognize it. In fact, the next review article that came out, which was a lot like the first review article that came out, said that this is very important. Things need to be done because there are significant cardiovascular consequences from untreated sleep disorder breathing. Yeah. So, again, was it me or was it something? I don't know. The fact is that I was a voice, and there are a lot of voices now.
Yes. Out
there that are promoting it, and there other than the National Sleep Foundation, whose portfolio was much broader than sleep disorder breathing. There weren't any other organizations out there that were specifically trying to address this issue in terms of diagnosis and in terms of effective treatment. So we did that. And so we put a stake in the ground, and I think, and now there's lots of flags flying around.
No, they are. And it's good to see. I mean, we're definitely making progress here and hope to continue to, see that. Yeah. So what is one thing that you would like to share with our audience, sort of a takeaway from all of this, with your experience and your leadership?
I think talk about it to people who, talk about it with their doctors, talk about it with your friends. We can't, the number of 30 million was the number that was being used for undiagnosed people when I came in 2004. Okay. It's easily double that, or maybe even triple that. Mm-hmm. And with the presence, with the obesity, the problem with obesity in this country, it's only going to be worse. Yeah. It's just, and it's the thing about sleep disordered breathing is that it's a vicious circle. It just keeps, you have it, you start eating things to keep you awake, which only makes you heavier, that only makes your apnea worse. So it's trying to break that cycle. And anything that the Alliance can do, the members of the Alliance or people who are watching this conversation between us can do, is keep talking about it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that just amazes me, and I guess I'm sort of trapped in one of the Facebook algorithms, because I look at things having to do with sleep. Now, everything about sleep comes up. All these various contraptions, many contraptions that are contraptions that were extant in 2004, 10 years ago, that are now kind of like zombies. They've come back, and now they're trying to promote them. Now, I think the important thing is to recognize that it's a problem, and then find a solution that works for you. I mean, it could be as simple as changing the way you sleep, sleeping more vertical than flat, not sleeping on your back. One of my favorite was seeing a patent for a sleep apnea treatment that involved a belt with two wiffle balls that had little holes in, just to keep people from sleeping on their back. Now there's all kinds of technology to do that, including something on the phone. There are implanted devices now. I'm not my cup of tea, but again, for me,
there are options available.
There's sleep disorder breathing is a continuum.
Yeah.
Going from upper airway resistance syndrome, which is just kind of no pauses in breathing, but just reduction in airflow, to sleep apnea, where you have occurrences of greater than 30 apneas an hour. I've heard stories about there being 100 apneas in an hour. I mean, how that person can still be alive, I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think there's an organization that is dedicated to promoting greater awareness about sleep disorder breathing, and also working in the policy space, and finding allies, particularly in the medical area. And I think getting to know cardiologists and making friends with them, and saying, let us help you with getting people educated about this condition and getting diagnosed and getting treated, I think is very, very important. And I think, sadly, back in the day, a lot of the professional organizations were more concerned about getting proper reimbursement for in-lab polysomnography. That was what it was about, was protecting reimbursement for in-lab polysomnography, not so much getting people treated.
No, and thank you for that. I think that's where we're very interested in continuing some of that education and awareness, and also overcoming the stigma of sleep apnea.
Yes.
I think that's equally important. Well, I think this has been great conversation today, and thank you so much for speaking with me. And go ahead.
No, I admire you for taking on the responsibility as the executive director of this organization. And I am sympathetic. I've been there, and I'm hoping that the path is not quite so steep as it was back in the day. But congratulations for doing this, and I wish you every good success to you in this field. And again, if I can be a resource to you, you know where to find me.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks a lot, Ed.